Welcome to our annual retreat for the Oregon State Board of Education. We are happy to be here today on what is a sunny day, but a day that has a little bit of haze. So we know that there are still wildfires raging in our region. It was nice to have a little break with the rain earlier this week or over the weekend. So a little respite. And a respite is the right word for what we are doing today. We meet as a board throughout the school year, and then we have one time a year that we come together to really reflect, to respond a little bit, but mostly to retreat. And the word retreat is a term that means in terms of a team like this, that we step back and we take a moment to recalibrate, refuel if needed, before we go back in for the work. And so the next couple of days are us doing that together as a team. And we're very excited to have with us our student advisors who have not yet been officially voted in, but we do have a recommendation from board leadership to vote them in. We'll do that in September, but we have asked them to join us today and tomorrow. We're excited to have a guest facilitator with us, who I will introduce in just one moment. And we're excited to have our board advisors with us as well. So thank you everyone for being here this morning and with us through the afternoon. My welcome didn't take as long as I thought it was going to take, because I normally like to talk a lot. But so I'm going to move on to introduce our facilitator who's going to help us through what we've put on the agenda called an opening exercise. As I've already said and sort of set the stage for, we are in a retreat. We are in a time to come together to reflect on the year that has passed, to prepare for the year that is to come. Our work as a board is very policy driven. Our work as a board is also about being strong influencers. And we are at the 30,000 foot really supporting the work of the Oregon Department of Education on behalf of Oregon students. We center our students in everything that we do. The priority that we have as a board is for every single student to belong and to feel safe when they are in school, so that they can be successful in their educational pursuits in the kindergarten, pre-K through 12th grade. And that we are also responsible for helping with those transitions. So we work closely with early learning so that the transition into pre-K and into kindergarten are smooth. We work with higher ed so that the transition out of 12th grade and into post-secondary is as smooth as possible, and then along that continuum. Because of that, it means that we are often shouldering a lot of information, a lot of questions. We talked a little bit in June about leading with curiosity as a way to continue to navigate conversations and the work that we need to do. And so it was with that kind of curiosity that I was speaking with a very I'm going to say longtime friend, because old friends makes it sound like both of us are old, but a longtime friend and colleague, Holly Hewson. Holly Hewson and I went to college together. I'm not going to say the dates in which we graduated, because that would, again, imply a certain age. But after college and throughout our adult lives, have crossed paths around our shared sort of passion for humanity. But we also share a lot of philosophical conversations about how do we navigate spaces that are difficult spaces? How do we use empathy to bring people together? And again, how do we sort of drive with curiosity? Holly has fascinated me because her journey has gone from education to NGO work or non-government organizational work in war-torn communities, to build community or rebuild community, to being a civilian representative of the government, of the military, I should say, in wartime in Afghanistan. She's also been in Rwanda. She's been in Kosovo. And when I say the names of those places, I know that you like me have a feeling of what that means just from the news that you've read. So if you can imagine actually having been literally on the front line in those communities, doing this kind of work of community building and rebuilding and restructuring and holding space for, and with the military really coming into communities with leading with diplomacy. And again, that sense of curiosity and empathy that is needed to walk into a village with the military who are holding guns and you are unarmed as a civilian consultant. Holly is also an avid reader. She is a writer. She is an Anglophile. She was born in the wrong country. She should have been born British, but she was not. But she has lived in Great Britain in multiple places throughout her adult life as well. Recently, she looked for an opportunity to take all of her experiences and pull them together and to do this kind of work intentionally with team building. And she discovered the Table Group. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about the work at the Table Group. But when she and I talked about our coming together as a board this summer for our retreat, it became very clear that the work she was doing with the Table Group, her lived experience and her professional experiences in places like Rwanda and Kosovo and Afghanistan really would be beneficial for us as we build our team to go forward into the next school year. So that is my introduction of Holly Hewson. I'm going to, a little bit early, turn it over to her to lead us through this, our morning exercise, if you will, before we go to our director's report. So everybody, I'd like to introduce you to Holly. If we want to give her a good Zoom applause. Welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. And thank you all, first of all, just for your time and your consideration. I'm humbled and honored to be with you. You are, you know, at one point I was going to be a history teacher, so I do have to correct the record. Bless you, Kimberly. It wasn't Rwanda, it's Sudan, Darfur, Sierra Leone, but not actually Rwanda. So just because that's a very evocative place, and I wouldn't want to take credit for that work. But lest you think of me as some that, you know, war and the front lines can sound like a bit exotic, or, you know, I would argue that I want to make the case to you that in the United States, we no longer have to leave our front door to be in a war zone. You know, you are, the analogies that Kimberly has shared with me in our conversations over the last couple of months have so often talked about the front lines, in the firing line, you know, in the crossfire, you know, so I just want to, you know, hold all of you you know, in my heart, and I've been thinking about you for the last few months, and just, you know, as I look at what you are navigating. And it's, and in a country awash with weapons, I can tell you that I just live with a dread of what can happen in my dear country because of how quickly things can fall apart. And that's a great book to recommend, Things Fall Apart. So the other thing that so just make that point of connection with you. So my background went from education and then went into you know, wanting to have meaningful work. I was raised by 3 generations of Christian pastors and 3 generations of nurses. I was sort of, I never had a chance really to, you know, and just I care. And I think that that's something as well that last night, some of you, we were talking about in kind of this our happy hour, and I'm sorry I didn't get to time with all of you, but we were talking about the burden of caring, the weight of caring. You would not be on this board, you would not be in the field of education if you did not care. And to care is to suffer. It hurts. It's going to hurt. And I think we have to own that reality up front, because I don't think I understood that until many years into my work, almost 2 decades of either operating or training for those front lines. And what a few years ago, I did a program called The Emotional Toll of Care. And so through the next 2 days, as you come together, I would almost just, in the moments that you have to reflect, thinking and owning that emotional toll, because it is real. And you probably know that, but it's important to check back in with that, because you do pay a price for caring. Life would be much easier if you just didn't care. But those beautiful students, and you are protecting, and you are these brave, courageous protectors and visionary people that know we can't, the status quo isn't good enough. But as I say, to be someone who's willing to take that action, to face that harsh reality, takes a toll. And so what I began to transition when I'll save that story for another time if we have it, of when I realized, oh, I don't think I can keep putting myself out there on that front line. I need to pivot. There's, I had reached a point of hitting a wall. And so when I began to I re-look at what I needed to do, I began to think, wait a minute, why is it that for those of us who work on the front line of human vulnerability, of human suffering, why is it so hard to take care of ourselves? It is so much easier, to take care of others and to prioritize others. But our ability to take care of ourselves is how we equip ourselves to serve others. And so it's attention. It's just attention we have to manage. And so I began to look at, okay, what does it mean to be a healthy responder, a healthy first responder, a healthy person? What does it mean to care, but try to stay as healthy as possible? And that's how I came in the end to the table group. I'm going to do a quick overview. It won't, usually we would take 2 days for this kind of work. And so we don't have that because I want to get right into it. This isn't, we always like to say this isn't touchy-feely teamwork building. This isn't, that's fine. There's a place for that. But we try to get right into the work and right into something that's practical and relevant for you. And so I'll do a quick overview of the model that we would say, like, what is a healthy organization? The table group is the practical application of organizational health. And we work with executive teams, we work with religious communities, we work with volunteer organizations. And I would argue, as you are on the front lines of what is it to be a human community in our richness and our diversity, what does it mean to be that? How do we manage those tensions and the resistance and the vision of what is possible? How do we manage that? You need to be a healthy organization. So this is the invitation for you, is to say, okay, are we a healthy team? Am I a healthy person? Is this, how do I navigate and help create a healthy community in my work, in my person, as a citizen? Any questions, just real quickly? I want to check in and see if there's anything that would like a point of clarification. And there's some people that are not on camera. That's to be expected? Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm clear.
Their support. So yes, thank you, Holly Pasky.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not leaving someone out. Okay, so we would talk. We talk about with teams that in this day and age, to truly succeed in whatever your goal and plan is, you've got to be smart, right? You've got to be smart about your strategy, about your education. You've got to be, all the things that that are technically what you need to do to succeed as a teacher. You need to be qualified. You need to be knowledgeable about your subject matter, right? You've got to be smart. But the other side of the equation we talk about is that you've got to be healthy. Are you a healthy organization? And the way we define that healthy is, we talk about this equation. I'm going to make sure I'm more used to flip charts. So we talk about smart and healthy as two sides of the equation. And most people focus on the smart side. That's the data-driven stuff. That's the stuff you can measure. The harder part is the healthy side. And we would talk about, how do you measure health? The health of an organization is minimal politics and minimal confusion. And so that's, that's the premise that we're coming at. And we would say that if you invest in that healthy side of your organization, you get things back, because you've all been on a dysfunctional team, and you've all been on, hopefully, a healthy team or a good team, at least for a short time. And what do you get if you invest in that healthy side? You get higher morale, and you get higher productivity. Who doesn't want to come to work or come to a board meeting or come to whatever organization or team that you're on when you have people have each other's backs, that you're clear and united in your vision, and that brings what we call high morale. And then if you have high morale, you're more productive. The other thing is you get to keep your superstars. You get to keep the people, because if you are not on a healthy team, you're looking for the exit. You're looking to leave, unless it's the bare minimum of like you need it's just the money, or it's just the sustenance that's keeping you there. You get to keep your superstars if you invest in the healthy side of your organization. And so, how do we create that? We talk about, and I don't know if I'm going to just change the blinds slightly because I don't want there to be a glare. Excuse me. Apologies. So
better, thank you.
We talk about, these pens are not clear enough. I'm going to move you forward. We talk about 4 disciplines of getting to a healthy organization, and I can send you notes on all this and a playbook and that sort of thing. So don't worry too much about taking all the notes. But we talk about 4 disciplines to creating a healthy organization, and the first thing you have to do is build a cohesive team. Okay, and we have 5 behaviors that I'm going to go over in a minute, and then we're going to dive into the foundational behavior. And so I'm going to go over that in just a minute, but you've got to be a cohesive team. Okay, the next thing we need to do is create clarity. Are you clear as a team about some of the basics of what makes you, that builds into that cohesive team? And there's 6 questions that we talk about. 1, why do we exist? Believe it or not, teams don't necessarily agree on why do we exist. This is the aspirational, this is our purpose. Now, you are very purpose driven. This is probably going to be an easy question to answer. And we're not going to, we'll go into a bit more of clarity tomorrow. Today, we're going to work on the cohesive team bit and just do an exercise there. But to create clarity for an organization, first of all, why do we exist? And the second one is, how do we behave? This is your values, but we think that values is such a nebulous word these days that it becomes so often for organization, it becomes, well, this would be that sounds good. Integrity should be a value. Honesty should be a value. I mean, it becomes a long list of just what we would say is permission to play. You've got to be honest, right? You've got to have integrity. But what are the core values that help you select who should be on your team, right? And we try to answer that with, how do we behave? What is acceptable behavior for this team? And you've got to actually articulate that and then use it. Use the answers to these questions you've got to use in terms of how you recruit, or how you free someone up from the board, or free someone to the marketplace if it's a company or an organization, right? Not everyone belongs on a team. If you were not prepared to work with the behaviors, what is acceptable behaviors? The third one is a simpler question. It's, what do we do? So that's a real simple, like, as a board, we are charged with, so that's a pretty simple question. 3, what do we do? 4 is, go ahead, Kimberly.
I just had an epiphany, like my mind just went poof. And that was thinking, this whole time that we were talking, I was thinking that the team was this body of people, board and advisors. But I think the team is bigger than that, which is the team that is the system of public education. And there are multiple roles within that. There's the board at this 30,000 foot view. There's the Oregon Department of Education, which is the sort of implementers, and the staff, right? And then there's the local school boards who are manifesting what is, implemented at the state level. And then there are the principals in each building, the superintendents, right? Then the principals in each building, and then the teachers, and then the students, right? But the students aren't at the bottom. The students are at the center of this giant team. I don't know why I hadn't thought about that before we started this conversation, but it does make the question of the cohesion, minimal confusion, and minimal politics, and the agreement on why we exist. It puts those questions into a much bigger pot than just this body of people. So I hope I didn't derail us, but that just came to me.
No, please, and anyone jump in. I should have said that at the beginning. It's so much more important. It keeps it relevant to you guys. So Kimberly, that's absolutely relevant. I mean, we're working, and we usually start with the executive team, right? So that's what we would talk about, with you guys. We're talking with this executive, but absolutely, as you answer these questions, we would say, then you have to marinate them, right? You've got to cascade those questions and those answers and see if they're correct, because you need all levels to be bought in. And I can tell you, in this day and age, the power of one to disrupt for good or evil is so great, and this. But this is why power has to pay attention to the lowest levels of the system. And that's what I would think, if I'm giving you my 5 cents worth. Power, what the resistance we're facing is that power is not wanting to pay attention to the lowest levels. It's not wanting to acknowledge. Traditionally, power doesn't have to listen. Power does not have to listen, because power, has disproportionate control. But in this day and age, whether you're armed with a cell phone, or as I saw in Afghanistan, the world's most, well-equipped, insanely funded military has just been defeated by people that are wearing flip-flops and blew up those $1 million vehicles with $2 worth of manure. The power of the lowest levels to disrupt, and that's for good, but it's also for destruction. And so we're in this chaos of what is happening to power. And so absolutely, whatever we come up with and whatever we work with, and we may not have enough time in these 2 days, but we'll find more time if needed. But those answers to these questions are so crucial to get these clear and to make sure there's no daylight between you, but then you've got to, ground truth that all the way through that system you described. So the fourth question, these are in some ways the easier questions. The next 2 questions are harder. The fourth question is, how will we succeed? Now, this is really your strategy, but again, we just think some of these words in English have just been so overused. What does strategy mean anymore? So we try to make it concrete and practical. How will we succeed? What are the 2, 3 anchors that we agree is crucial and become the filters that we examine everything that comes up to our desk? And it helps us say no to things and helps us say yes to things, because there's no end of good idea fairies. And if money weren't an issue, wow, what we would do over here. But all those things are issues. So the question, helping teams really get to, how will this team succeed? And we call those your strategic anchors. And that's question 4. Question 5 is, in full disclosure, Kimberly has already put her weighed in on saying this is really important for us. And that's what we'll work on tomorrow, is what is our number 1 priority? If you go back into the etymology, priority in the Greek is not plural. That is something we have done in the modern era. We create priorities and we create these massive big lists. And there's, of course, many, many things that are important. But what is the number one priority that this team needs to get behind, that only this team can deliver in like a 3 to 9 months? We talked about, maybe like within the school year. Maybe it's a 3-month goal. You need to get this done by the end of the year. And if you did, it would make such a difference. And then you create a new priority. What is the number one thing? And you check in with that every time you meet. Okay, so that is question 5. What's most now? It's crucial to have that, because if you don't select that priority, then everything's important, but urgent takes over. And then it's amazing. You find teams that have 29 priorities. You think, and they're getting none of them done. So it's important to get to that one. And then the last one is who's going to do what. So when we work on that priority question, then we need to make sure that we figure out, like, okay, so who's gonna, how do we break that down? So it's not just a sentence. This is what's important. We break it down and we get into, like, okay, how are we gonna deliver that, and who's gonna report back on what they're responsible for. So this is who and what. I guess we snuck 2 questions into there. The third, and we would say the third and fourth discipline, we won't have time for, but basically this is how we talk about you over communicate clarity. People need to hear things over and over and over, right? Marketing, I don't know, are there anyone who's from marketing background here? Usually they tell us 7 to 9 times people need to hear something. So when you've marinated those questions, the answers to those questions, and you've got you've got your clarity as education in Oregon, it's now you've got to, and as leaders, all of you, it's over communicating that clarity, right? 7 to 9 times. Although the most recent team I was on with a marketing, she says no, now it's 15 because we're hearing so many messages. You've got to be, so once it's clear, but also over communicating that. And then we talk about discipline 4, reinforce that clarity. This is where it stops becoming words and you have to really build that into your systems, right? Like, again, this is how you select who's on the board. This is how you hire people. This is what tells you how you fire people. How do you reward people? It's got to be consistent with what you say are the behaviors that are acceptable, or why we exist and what do we do. This is where we reinforce it. Otherwise, if it's not reinforced and consistent, you breed that cynicism. This is just words. This is just, people that don't understand what it's like for me on the ground in this school. So we've got to have consistency. We talk about reinforcing clarity. Okay, now let's go now. So at the table group, we love triangles. So I'm just going to warn you that, but you're going to get a small dose of this. I'm going to just, we talk about, I want to make sure, can you see that? I'm so sorry. These pens are not very clear. I hope it's okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
So this is cohesive team. How do we create a cohesive team? So we're starting with you guys. And then, of course, this is something that is relevant. How do we create a cohesive society, right? I mean, this is, how do we have a cohesive marriage? So Kimberly, these are some notes for you as well, right? So the foundation of everything we do is trust, okay? And if no one here is having a slightly little cynical moment and saying, oh, seriously, Holly, trust, really? I will forgive you, because everyone who talks about leadership and teamwork talks about trust. But we really try to figure out the nuance in things, right? And so what we would say is, you know what? A dysfunctional team can still have trust. The trust that most people talk about is what we would call predictive trust. It's what we know about each other. There are things I know about Kimberly because I've known her for some decades. Kimberly, those years are on LinkedIn, man. They know when I graduated, right? We can't hide. So what we talk about, and Kimberly, you talked about this yesterday, when we talk about trust, we're not talking about what you can predict about each other, because you get that for free with time. You know, you don't have to work at that. And this you have to work at. And we're talking about vulnerability-based trust. Or VBT, we just acronym. I can send you stuff on all this. So if it's especially because my handwriting, because with vulnerability-based trust, we're talking about the ability to be open and honest with each other, the ability to short to this team. I promised I was going to deliver, and Lupe, I'm sorry. My life, I'm sorry, I'm letting you down, but I need your help. Can you help me? Or Branda, you're so much better at this than I am. You know, show me how you do it. Can you spare some time for that? Right? Or George, I'm sorry, I was impatient and I went over the line in that meeting, and I'm sorry. I want you to know I'm sorry. Okay? It's the ability to be open and honest with each other, to own it. Vulnerable trust should be non-negotiable, because it's the only way you'll talk about the things you need to talk about. It should be non-negotiable. And it makes all the difference. And over here, we like to talk about, on this side, the role of the leader. And the role of the leader, and we're going to practice this in just a minute, is to go first. And just, again, reflecting on our conversation yesterday, what do we need to do in this, you know, facing hostility? Can you go first and bring that vulnerability? And as I said, and I'm sorry myself for those of you yesterday, but I tell you, operating unarmed in a war zone, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, operating unarmed made it easier to have truly productive conversations with the local population. I had access to the locals that my military colleagues could only dream of. Because you think about it, you come in with your sunglasses and your armor and your weapon. You are a threat. I'm standing like this, right? I'm not a threat. I was actually probably covered up, but depending on where I was. But I tell you, being unarmed was a way I could disarm, because they know I can't defend myself. So they don't need their weapon, because there's no way, right? I'm not a threat. And so it gave me access to the local population. And then, you know, obviously they traditional cultures, they judge everything through your eyes. They see right into your soul. This is an art we have lost, I think, in many parts of the Western culture, that we've lost the ability to read the soul and to read the beauty in each other. We don't look enough at each other in each other's eyes, but they do in traditional cultures. So there's the case for not being too educated, maybe something we need to think about at some point, of being overeducated. But so but I mean that I have lived this. So how do we possibly take off that armor and go first? Is one challenge. So that's the foundation of everything we do. Once you know you have each other's back, you can get to the next level of these are the 5 behaviors. I should have said that. These are the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. And the second behavior is conflict. Now that's a loaded word. And especially if you grew up in my household where parents never raised their voices at all. And then you go to, let's say I went to an Italian family's home, and then it's all loud and shouting, and I thought there was going to be a divorce. So, but it's just that a lot of it's how we were raised, it's culture. But what we're talking about, conflict, is critical to this team, because we're talking about healthy conflict. The ability to challenge each other's ideas. This is not a license for personal attack. This is the ability to have passionate, unfiltered debate. We call it PUD. This is the ability to challenge each other's ideas. Conflict is so important. It's a measure of how you come together as a team and think and make decisions. It's a measure. Are you able to have healthy conflict? It's the only way that you will be able to harness the collective wisdom and the diversity of your team and your experience. You've got to be able to challenge each other and be challenged. And remember, this is built, these behaviors are all interlinked. Conflict without vulnerability-based trust leads to politics, right? It's the pursuit of individual glory. It's win-lose. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about conflict built on trust. You're just trying to get to the best possible answer, right? So that's why I'm challenging you, because I'm not sure if I'm right, but I'm still pretty attached to my thoughts. So help me understand. What have you seen on another team? What have you seen in life that makes you cautious? And the role of the leader is to mine for it. And this may be, Kimberly, you're talking about, bringing on some new people. This may be asking the most junior person on the team to talk first. It might be asking the newest member of the team to go first. What are those fresh eyes that might bring? So make sure that you are mining, that you mine for conflict. When you can have a true debate and wrestle these issues, these critical things that you're dealing with and issues that you're dealing with, wrestling that to the best possible answer, then we talk about then you can get to the next level, which is commitment. Now, at this stage in the pyramid, there's a trap that we all have fallen into. And that's where we just kind of nod and yes, I agree. I've heard the facts. I've heard the argument. I agree. But that's passive commitment. And we're not talking about just a passive commitment. And furthermore, that would be a dangerous game to play, given the type and the importance of the work you're doing. We need real commitment. Commitment that lasts, that when you're a team together on the board, the decisions you make, that you're really committed. And when you go back to your own teams, or your own, you go back home and you don't say to your partner, that'll never work. They're delusional. You need to be a team together and a team apart. And to get to real commitment, you need clarity and you need buy-in. It sounds simple, and everything in this model is so simple, but it's doing the simple thing that in our humanity, we start to miss things. And so it's doing simple things with uncommon levels of discipline. So what is clarity? Clarity is making sure in your meetings that you take time, you protect time to make sure that you go over what have we decided? Are we clear? Do we have the same idea? Protect that time to get to clarity. And the other one is buy-in. Because again, remember, we all can do this. I've done it, right? I'm out in the middle of, I'm out in Darfur and my headquarters is in Copenhagen and they're telling me, what they think. And I'm just, I don't have the energy to argue with you. I'm just, okay. No, that's not real commitment. And so if we're taking time to invest in our vulnerable trust, we're taking time to make sure that everyone has spoken and everyone's opinion has been heard. Most of us are reasonable. If you have had the chance to be heard, and this is true even for the people that are hostile to where you're trying to go, most people are reasonable. Now, not all, but to be reasonable, we're talking about if you've been given the chance to be heard, and if you understand how the decision is being made, most of us can buy in. But you got to understand how the decision's been made. And so that's where the role of the leader and or leaders is to get to that buy-in, taking time to listen, taking time to understand what you've decided, but you have to at some point make a decision. You got to get to closure. And so you're wanting to get to closure with buy-in. So clarity and closure is the role of the leader to get to real commitment. And sometimes it won't go your way. And you might want to use an example if you're, of when a decision's been taken and it's not gone your way. But the question is, can you disagree and commit? and you know, and if Kimberly's saying, or someone is, if you're having to explain to someone else as a board, how did you make your decision? It will make such a difference to people. Okay, so with that commitment, now we get to the next level of behavior, which is accountability. Okay. With accountability, we're not talking about the leader holding each other accountable. We're talking about this team, peer-to-peer accountability. The ability to hold each other accountable for what you have committed to and what you've promised. Or maybe it's those behaviors that you see someone slipping, right? The ability to hold each other with grace and humility, but hold each other accountable. Great teams can argue and hold each other accountable in a safe space. Okay, this is peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer accountability. And the role of the leader is to confront the difficult issues. Okay, now that might sound a bit paradoxical because I just said it's about peer-to-peer accountability, right? But really, as leaders, you should be the second line. You should be the second line of accountability. You want to encourage your teams to hold each other accountable. Okay, you save time, you get quick course correction, and hopefully you've invested and you know each other, and you've invested in your vulnerable trust, and you know that you trust each other, you have each other's best interest at heart, and the best interest of the team. Okay, so this is to confront difficult issues. When it's not happening. If we're working on all those behaviors, we get to the top level, which is results. And that it's all about results. This isn't about just being fluffy. This is about the results that you need to deliver. And these results, we're talking about the collective results of the team, not individual members, right? These are the collective results of this team. So this team here, this board, this is your number one team. And that can be difficult because we all have areas and other teams that we lead, and that can be our safe space. This might be, you know, it takes time to invest in it, but it can be awkward to say, this is my first team. But for the decisions you need to make as a team, this is your first team. And we think of it, you need to think of it as the collective results of this team. And that role of that leader is to keep that focus. On those collective results. If you invest in this, the model is also a diagnostic. If something's going wrong, with accountability, and we're not something's not being called out, the answer might be to look into the level below. Look at commitment. Has someone gone on, maternity or paternity leave, and there's someone new who was brought in, but we never took time to properly engage them on what we've decided and what we've committed? Well, then how can they be held accountable? They haven't been fully brought in. So team dynamics are always in flux. And so if there's an issue at any level of these behaviors, look to the level below. If you're not able to have healthy conflict, and I don't think we'll have time, but we like to talk about like creating rules for conflict. How are we going to encourage? Because most teams live in what we call artificial harmony. Let's just not talk about it. And let me tell you, this is the real problem with the Brits, because the British culture, it's like, let's take that offline. Let's talk about that, agree to disagree. And then we never talk about it again. And so that's the challenge, especially in Britain, but it can be true of American teams as well. So if there's an issue with conflict and we're not able to have, I don't feel confident to have that passionate, unfiltered debate, something that Jerry said to me, kind of like, oh, that triggered something for me, and now I've clammed up. Well, then it's back to that role of the leader or the team to mind for what's going on. What is it? What is something we haven't taken time to look at? Okay, and so it's constantly building. It's dynamic, but it's building in that vulnerability-based trust. You will go faster. If you've invested in that, you will be able to go faster because you understand each other and you understand more about what someone might have said. And so when you get to conflict, you'll make better decisions. Because if you're harnessing the wisdom and the diversity of a full team, and you've made sure to get all those ideas there onto the table, you'll make better decisions. You'll make better decisions, you'll go faster, and they'll last longer because you get real commitment. You've taken time for clarity, you take time for the buy-in, and you get to real commitment, and those decisions will last longer. But of course, life still happens. And so with accountability, we need that so that we get quick course correction, right? You think of a boat or a sailboat, you know, the ability to quickly tack against the wind. If you've created, invested in that space so that you can have peer-to-peer accountability, you can you're like, oh my God, am I doing that again? Ah, thank you. Okay, back on track. And all of those build to the collective results of the team. Any questions on these 5 behaviors? Did it make sense? Any cynics? Any passionate, unfiltered debate you want to tell me? I saw a hand. Jennifer. Is it Jennifer or
Yeah, Jennifer's fine. Thank you, Holly. As we're going through this, I have to admit I'm the artificial harmony, and it's not to say it's with this board, right? It's not, you know, we have really great people on here, but as far as navigating through even this year and some of the concerns around what teachers are teaching and conflict around some people who believe that it's somehow biased in some way and it's not just truth. And so a lot of teacher feedback is around, hey, I'm going to teach the truth to students, even if the truth is painful or the truth is maybe hard to hear, it's still the truth. But now there's these weird pressures that are happening that teachers have discussed around being kind of pushed to minimize the importance of truth, especially like in history classes or ethnic studies and things in that order. And so it's making me think about all of those things around how do we have cohesive teams, teach with clarity, reinforce clarity, all those kind of things when there are these pressures and forces that are trying to say what teachers are doing when they're teaching truth with clarity, that's somehow wrong. And so it's just making me think about all of that and what teachers are facing, especially this year coming into the fall.
Well, that's making me think, you know, if maybe we can take time tomorrow, because I think, Kimberly, we're going to 11:15 about, right? Is that correct?
11:15, yeah. Okay,
so but Jennifer, thank you. And my middle name is Jennifer, so I love your name. So I'm just thinking if we take time to, because it's not long, but we can talk about spend a few minutes tomorrow on creating rules for conflict, because maybe that's something that would be valuable. Teachers, you know, if you set, you know, it's creating that safe space, right? But boundedness, creating those boundaries. Okay, you know, this is not going to be easy, you know, and some of you, you know, maybe it's probably a lot easier for the kids, but it's not easy because of their parents or whatever. And so maybe creating those rules for conflict, because we want to get out of artificial harmony. That's where most teams like to live. But the other end is what is the other end of the spectrum? Personal attack. And we don't want either one, right? We want to get into the middle, and we want to get so that we can have passionate, unfiltered debate, but teaching kids that it's okay to debate. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to say, I don't get that. But do it in a safe way that is you're attacking ideas and the quality of ideas, not the person. So, but what we do if we had more time is we would go specifically into each, you know, how can we deepen and invest in each layer of those behaviors? So what I want to do now is do a simple exercise on how we can start with vulnerability-based trust. How can we start right away and get into, and as this team right here? And then, and then tomorrow, I think I'll figure it out that we can, because we want to get today to agree on a focus. What is one thing this team can do to build your team cohesion? And then tomorrow we're going to do a bit more on the clarity and get to the what's most important now for this team. But let's try to get in a little bit on rules for conflict of that as well, if that's okay, Kimberly. So, okay. we call this exercise, this is how, a way to kind of step into vulnerable trust. And it's one of the things, and this is going to be completely relevant, I'm sure, has everyone heard about the fundamental attribution error? So this is one of these, oh, yes?
Kimberly, you're muted.
I've heard the term before, but I don't, but so I was just doing this to say, kind of, I've heard it before.
Okay, well, you've done it. I do it. And this is like one of those basic human cognitive biases that we have, right? We will give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. And the people I love and know well, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, right? The people I don't know can do the exact same thing that I just did, and I don't give them the benefit of the doubt, right? So I will judge, let's say I'm driving, someone, and someone, cuts me off, and I have to slam on my brakes, and I've got pets or kids or, and I'm like, the adrenaline is there, and I'm angry, and we are more likely in that moment to judge that person a bad character. There is a character flaw with that person. How dare he risk me and cut me off like that. Next day, I'm driving. All of a sudden, I realize, that I got caught on a call, and now I'm late, and now I need to. There's my exit on the freeway, and I need to get off, and I'm gonna have to cut someone over. And so, we do this kind of little shoulder thing, like sorry. We try to get small, and we say, I would never usually do this. I'm so sorry. I've got to get over. Sorry. We won't judge ourselves a bad character, right? We'll just say like, oh, but it was circumstance. I would not usually do that. So the ability to overcome that, we need to know something about each other. And so some of you will have worked together for a while, some of you are newer. And so this is just an exercise that helps us. We constantly need to get over. And I would say, especially with the resistance that whenever you're facing resistance, probably a fundamental attribution error is at work. People are assuming something about you because they don't know enough about, again, why you're saying what you're saying, or they just don't know, they don't understand you. So this is a deliberate exercise that we'll do just for the last bit here. And it's how we can overcome that. And it's how we can also just get to know each other better. 3 questions that we're going to, and Kimberly, I'm going to ask you to go first in the spirit of the leader, going first with building vulnerable trust. First question, where did you grow up?
Do you want me to answer that now?
No, I'm going to give you all 3, and then we'll start with you. Where did you grow up? Second question, do you have any siblings? And if so, how many? Where did you come in that birth order with siblings? And the third question, what is a unique or difficulty or challenge for you growing up? I'm not a psychologist. It's up to you how deep you want to go, but something you wrestled with, something that didn't make sense, something that was tough. And if childhood isn't the one, you could pick last week, or you could pick college, or whatever. But just something about you that you had to wrestle with. So Kimberly, let's start with you.
Okay, so I was born in Loma Linda, California, and I am the oldest of 3 children. So I have 2 siblings. And a unique challenge or conflict I had growing up was I got shushed a lot because I was either talking too much or too loud. When I was in the home, I felt safer than when I would go. When I started school is when it really hit. In kindergarten, I got put behind a screen because I was talking to the other kids.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Who would like to go next? Lupe?
I don't know if I saw any other hands, so I'll volunteer because I love to talk also, as everyone knows. Where did I grow up? I grew up in between a few places. The first memories that I have of growing up as a child were in Mexico, where my mom and dad were from. I was born in Washington State, Eastern Washington State, and we returned there when I was in kindergarten and did some more grade school there. Then I also grew up in Eastern Oregon. And finally, I did all of, I think, the last most transformational growing up in Corvallis, Oregon, when I was in college. But I'm not done growing up, right? I'm always growing up. I have, I'm one of 6 siblings. I'm the second one in birth order. And a unique challenge that I had when I was growing up is feeling like I didn't belong. And that is very much connected to race and ethnicity, both here and in Mexico when I had the opportunity to live there as well. But mostly here in school and socially and in our community, just the feeling of not belonging was very prevalent in my life.
Thank you. Thank you. That resonates with my experience as well. Yeah. Someone else like to go? Jennifer? Sorry if I'm missing any hands, but Jennifer, go ahead.
Sure. I think I just didn't want to go. Colt, did you have your hand up too? I thought you had your hand, so I just didn't want you to get missed. I'm sorry.
No, thanks, Jennifer, but go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. So I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. I was the baby of 7. So, yeah, and 2 half siblings. So they weren't raised with us when I was the baby girl. Actually grew up in the same house all of my life until my wedding day, which is so crazy. And I married the boy across the street, which is I'm like, okay, yes, I believe God has a great sense of humor because we've known each other since middle school. So it's just really funny. But great, super great guy. We've been married 24 years. And then challenge growing up. If people were to look at my accolades growing up and as far as successes and achievements and yearbooks and things like that, they would assume that I was super, happy as far as growing up in Eugene. And we were blessed to have George Russell was our superintendent. So we had, great person in leadership and stuff. But the challenge was I was oftentimes the only one. And so it may sound strange, but I was kind of, my safety was at home. And so people would say, well, Jen, you were student body president, you were, all these, achievements, and you did this and that. But they didn't realize that my wall was up because my safety was at home. In my culture, where my hair was accepted, where my skin tone was beautiful, where we had Ebony and Jet magazine and Essence magazine, and we talked about HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. So that was part of my home culture. So the beauty of being in the skin that I am, it was truly beautiful. Multicultural family reunions, gatherings that were multiracial, multicultural, because my parents were very active. But in school, going to school, I was a high achiever in a lot of ways, but I had to learn to navigate with my mask on. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges, wanting to get out of Eugene. And I believe God has different plans. Sometimes we make plans and it's like, oh, okay, that's cute, but I have another plan for you. But that's true. But But again, if you looked at my accolades, people would never really know that, how desperate I was to get out, to go somewhere else, so that I wasn't always the only one or treated kind of like a trophy. Like I have a Black friend, but never really being connected in those groups. But my yearbook would show you something different. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges I had growing up, navigating through those systems and trying to stay positive, but at the same time screaming inside, I got to get out of here. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Colt, were you next, or is there someone else would like to go?
Sure, I can go. And I think George looked like he was ready too. And most of us haven't met Rachel yet. So I'm anxious for us to be able to welcome Rachel into the space too. So I'm Colt Gill. I grew up in Oregon in Lane County, much like Jennifer. I have one younger sister that's quite a bit younger, so sometimes more thought of as like a third parent for her. That'd be her perspective, I think. So, and then I'd say that my unique or sort of difficulty growing up was that I have a learning disability. And so learning to read was very challenging for me and didn't happen until late into school. And I think that caused me in school to mostly try to disappear from the teacher and oftentimes other students. So I'd find seating where I was least conspicuous and tried to have behavior that would cause me not to be called on, especially if there was, the round robin reading thing where people would take turns reading sections of a book. That was terrifying for me. So I would always hide out during those parts of class. So I think that's mine.
Thank you. Thank you. George.
Thank you, George Russell. I grew up mostly in New York area, actually lived in 3 of the boroughs, Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. Went to a number of different schools because my dad was career military. So that affected how I looked at school, and seemed like new friends every other year or so as we changed schools. I had a twin brother and have a younger sister. My twin brother actually passed away at age 40, having never recovered from his service in Vietnam and the addiction and PTSD that he had as a result of that time. And then the thing that I remember about my childhood, one of my experiences was because we lived in New York and both of my parents were from the South, we often traveled to either Georgia or Virginia to visit grandparents. And I still freshly remember having to pack food to make sure we had something to eat because we couldn't eat in restaurants on the way once we crossed into Maryland, heading south, nor could we stay in hotels, so we often slept in the cars. And I remember those experiences even to this day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I can.
Anyone else? Rachel?
It's actually Rochelle, but don't worry, I
Rochelle.
get confused by Rachel all the time. But yeah, I'm Rochelle. I was born and raised here in Salem, Oregon. I am an only child, and a challenge or difficulty I had growing up, I think just being raised by a single mother and being the first to do a lot of things. I think being an only child, and especially coming from a mom who immigrated to this country many years ago, we're navigating a lot of things for the first time. And with that, it comes through education. So yeah, I would say being the first to do a lot of things and being raised by a single mom.
Thank you. Thank you, Rochelle.
I'll jump in. I was born in Portland, Oregon, and grew up in Vancouver. I'm an only child as well. Yeah, it's actually something I hated growing up, but I think the difficulty that I experienced that I think of associated with my childhood is more kind of a theme that we've heard from Kimberly and Lupe and Jennifer also of, and Colt, I guess all of us, George, knowing that you were somehow different, that you experienced and perceived the world differently than the peers around you. I, from a young age, felt very clear on my pride in being a woman, and that I was fully capable and able to do anything that I wanted in life. And that was supported by my family. And then I got, you get into school in high school and you confront different perceptions and experiences. And especially growing up in the 90s, even though I attended a large high school, there was a lot of resistance to my view and my sort of awakening awareness of social apart from peers. And sometimes that was really uncomfortable, but you know what, it got me very much prepared for the life that I am currently leading and choose to lead and am passionate about leading. And so, reflecting on challenges as gifts, I think that was a huge experience, a huge lesson I learned fairly early on in childhood of it's tough now, but these things shape you and create who you are. So yes, Oregon native, only child, strong feminist.
Thank you. Jerry.
Thank you, Holly. I grew up in Eagle Rock, which is near Pasadena by the Rose Bowl in Southern California. And I have a sister, an older sister, who lives in Walnut Creek near the Bay Area in California. I had a situation where my parents were a bad match, a bad marriage, and a very difficult situation for my sister and myself. And somehow, out of, I'm not sure where, my answer was to get away and go to college, that could be a way to escape and have a different life. And so I decided to apply to colleges, and then whatever the first one that accepted me was, I would go. And that was Oregon State. They accepted me sight unseen, never really been out of the Los Angeles area, but it just felt like an escape. And I enjoyed college so much that I took coursework constantly without a break from the age 17 to 38. And I just felt as though I had found things that were denied at the family level, an opportunity to be involved in activities that I never even dreamed of that I could be a part of, and to really enjoy a very different environment. And so it's one of those examples of maybe a bad thing pushing you into something that wouldn't have happened, taking a crisis and finding the silver lining. And that's what college did for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. Ryan, bring us home there, Ryan.
Hi, everybody. I was born in Fort Rucker, Alabama. My dad was also career military, so I lived in Alabama 3 different times, but lived all around the world and around the country in between. I have a younger brother, so I'm the oldest of 2. He and I were really close because we moved so frequently, so I was lucky to have sort of a built-in friend. I also sort of feel like I came into my own in Corvallis at Oregon State. So there's a little theme there. In terms of the final part of the question, I think my answer is something I've only sort of arrived at in recent years, reflecting back on my childhood. I being a perpetual new kid, I think was good in a lot of ways. I feel like I'm comfortable sliding into new situations and got pretty good at that growing up. But I think reflecting back, maybe a downside of it was that I never really settled in, not just to a place, but sort of I did enough to, sort of fit in and achieve what needed to be achieved, but was always moving on to the next place and never really sort of figured out who I was and what I cared about. It was sort of, what do I need to do to, survive in this new situation? And all of a sudden you're an adult and it's like, I don't actually know what, what I care about or what, who I am if I'm just sort of left to my own devices. And so that's been something that, through college and professional career has been sort of a continuing learning experience for me, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I think moving around was great. But that's sort of a lingering challenge of that, I think.
Thank you, everyone. Did you learn anything new about each other? There's so many points of resonance with several of you. I know for me, my time is up with you this morning, but vulnerability, it's so powerful. The impact is immediate. And just being able to know something a bit more about each other. So spending that time with the new people, Rochelle, it's not Rachel, the everything from the small things to the deep challenges that we've all overcome. And as many of you pointed out, we're stronger for them, but it doesn't mean that they might not still hurt. And some of that sensitivity that many of you experienced in those, it doesn't surprise me that you would arrive to education. Okay, Kimberly, I think that's me. So maybe we'll connect a little bit later and just make sure that we're still on track for tomorrow, what you want to work on. But yeah, and any comments and thoughts are welcome. Any, now or going forward, please, I'm here to serve. So.
Thank you so much, Holly. I took lots of notes, and we will, as Holly said, share handouts so that if there's anybody that wants to make reference. It was a good morning, and it was accomplished a lot of things. So thank you very much for your time. We'll see you tomorrow morning. You are welcome to stay on with us as we continue with our meeting, or you're a busy person. If you need to log off, we'll see you tomorrow at the same time at 10. Thanks so much, Holly.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Take care.
For the rest of us, we are going to take a quick break before we go into our report from Director Gill. Let's make it a really quick break. So let's just do 5 minutes. We'll call it a fluid break for intake and outflow, and to stretch your legs just a little bit. And so it's 11:17 right now. Let us come back at, I get to practice my math, at 11:25. I did it. All right, 11:20. No, I didn't. No.
11:22.
11:22. I should have asked the 5-year-olds. They would know. I'm not kidding. Kenton would have told you right away without even blinking. He would have told you it was 11:22. See you at 11:22. Yeah, still 11:22. Thanks, everyone. Back from the break, everyone. We're going to go right into our report from Director Colt Gill.
Great. Thanks, Chair Howard. I appreciate that. A couple of things before I get started. So one is that there are so many things that we need to catch up on and continue to talk about. This retreat is covering some of those, but the work that you all will be engaged this year around some of what I'll talk about with Ready Schools, Safe Learners, but also Senate Bill 744 to to advise the legislature on any kind of update to graduation requirements. We'll be talking deeply about the state school fund and how those allocations are developed and distributed. We'll be working towards adopting social emotional learning standards. We'll talk about our internal equity plan at the department, and Jessica and Rick will share a number of things tomorrow around other bills that pass that will come to your table here. So really appreciate the opening that we had. And I just want to note that there's a lot of things I'm not going to talk about today, as I'm mostly talking about the COVID-19 mitigation efforts for this coming school year. There are a couple of closely related topics that I'm also not talking about. One of those is our Care and Connection program that we're opening the school year with this year. We have partner districts all over the state that are thinking about the opening days of school and throughout the school year, developing those strong relationships between students and other students and their educator partners, and creating space for students to sort of unpack and think about all that they've lived through this last year. And then we also have released a toolkit for our leaders across the state to be able to more thoughtfully communicate about racial equity and respond to concerns that are brought forward to them. So hopefully we can come back and talk about those things as well. Finally, I also want to note that in a few minutes, we'll be joined by Kati Mosley, who is our Ready Schools Safe Learners resiliency leader. And over time, as we move out of the pandemic, although you'll clearly see as I present that we're nowhere near that at the moment, Kati will help lead our agency from the learnings of this time in the pandemic, and think about student and school and staff resiliency and how we can take those learnings going forward into new school years into the future. So she may jump in at any moment. She's in other meetings right now, but if she sees something on one of these slides that she wants to go deeper with, she might do that. What I am going to try to talk about, and again, pretty quickly, is our values and priorities for this coming school year. I'm going to give you a little bit of an update around where we're at with COVID-19 this week in Oregon, which is, well, let me say a little bit more. And then I'll talk about the resiliency framework, what's included in it, and some of the health and safety protocols and some of the changes that have happened in just the last 2 or 3 weeks in relation to where we're at with COVID. And then I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you have for as long as you have time for as well. I'll note one other thing, almost all of these slides are now co-branded with the Oregon Health Authority, and that is because we are working so tightly with the Oregon Health Authority that it is sometimes challenging for us to remember which of these programs or efforts is theirs and which one's ours and which one was co-developed together. So we're doing a lot of co-branding around COVID-19 and school year efforts. So a couple of things around our values and priorities. It is a really clear value that we're holding deeply at the department, that the governor holds, that our schools hold, that we need to implement protocols really thoughtfully so that we can reliably hold in-person school for each of our students every school day all year long. We know that we can do this. Oregon schools are in a place right now where we have learned that the mitigation protocols work. We've successfully accomplished that last school year. We had a lot of state requirements. This year, we're pulling back from many of those because our districts are practiced and know how to do those locally. But we're also in a place where school in Oregon is compulsory, meaning that students are required to attend school. And schools are also this congregate setting where COVID-19 could spread easily if precautions were not taken. We've seen a pretty steep increase in COVID-19 rates and hospitalizations driven by the Delta variant. I'm going to take you through some of that data in just a minute. And our schools are mostly unvaccinated settings. So while many educators and school staff are vaccinated, most students are not. So students under 12 are not yet eligible. Those 12 and up, we have less than 50% of our students who are vaccinated at this time. So we really need to take that into account as we think about coming back into the school setting. What we know is that all the layered mitigation efforts like face coverings can really help us reduce any kind of COVID-19 exposure from one person to another, which reduces the number of people in quarantine, keeps them in school, reduces community spread, and helps us serve our students in school, where we think they not only can learn more effectively, but can be provided with peer-to-peer interaction and access to other physical and mental health and well-being supports and school meals and a number of other resources. So that's our big goal. To get there, we have this mix now of both local and state decision-making. Our schools are really practiced in implementing the health and safety protocols. All schools were open by the end of the school year last year. Some were open the entire school year. And so they know how to do this well. We saw very little spread within the school setting last year. However, under Executive Order 2115, we are still under a state of emergency related to COVID-19. And our Oregon Health Authority under Chapter 431A of the state statutes still has a responsibility and authority to protect public health. And in our resiliency framework, we noted that when there are changes in the amount of transmission of COVID-19, which we're experiencing now, and I'll share in a minute, the severity of the illness, which we're also experiencing, or availability of vaccine for our younger kids, that we will make changes to our guidance, and that some of those changes may mean that things that were once local control become state control, or things that were once state control become local control. So we're constantly shifting and adjusting to match the needs around COVID-19. Right now, just to give you a sense of what is advisory and recommended for school districts and what is required of them, I'm doing a comparison to the last school year. So last school year, there were over 120 state requirements. There were 90 pages in our main document, and then several other documents with what totaled several hundred pages of requirements and guidance for schools to follow last school year. This year, they have that information. They can go back and look at that information, but nearly all of it is recommended and decisions are made at the local level. This is what we heard after a series of 2 engagement processes, one that began in late March and April, and a second one that came in May and June. And we heard from folks that they want to have a higher level of local control. And so that was created for them. So this year at this time, there are 5 state requirements that can continue or are new. So one of them is that each school district, and this becomes even more critical, has a locally published and a plan for operations with their protocols listed. We think it's even more critical. It was required last year as well, but this year, since different districts will be making different decisions, their students, their staff, their communities all need to know what those are. So that needs to be clearly published and then submitted to the department, so we have it on our website for the public to see as well. A recovery services process. This is a new process specifically aimed at students who experience disability, who we want to make sure receive the services that they needed last year to succeed, and then will continue this year. So this will be a year-long process that staff will go through with students who experience disability and their families. The quarantine and isolation protocols, those come to us from the Oregon Health Authority and are based on CDC recommendations. They were required last year and will continue to be required this year. And those are accomplished through partnership at the local school level with the local public health authority. Indoor face coverings are one of the protocols that is required at every single school in Oregon this year, and it was required last year as well. And then vaccination for school staff and volunteers. This is a new requirement related to the availability of vaccine and the effectiveness of the vaccine. And I'll talk a little bit more about that one. There are a handful of other requirements that are not new. They existed prior to COVID-19 and continue to this day. So these are also state requirements that every school district have a communicable disease plan. Again, that was required prior to COVID-19, that they have an isolation space for people who have been exposed to a communicable disease plan, again, required prior to COVID-19, and that there is an exclusion protocol for students exposed to certain communicable diseases. Among those is COVID-19. And then the Division 22 rules that you all propagate, those are largely back to what they had been pre-COVID-19, and districts are still required to follow those. All other decisions are local. The department and or health authority strongly recommend multiple layered mitigation protocols similar to what was in place last year, but how those are implemented, where and when and which of them are all local decisions that will be made. So that kind of gives the outline of kind of the priorities, values that we're going into the school year with. I'm going to jump into an update just around where we're at with COVID-19. This is a map that goes by date, starts with July 5th up in this left-hand corner, and then goes just through August 9th. So this is even more red today, but looks at the United States and the spread of the Delta variant and how quickly it came and how quickly it surged across our counties. So I'm going to dive into Oregon, which you can clearly see at this point is very red, every county affected by the Delta variant in Oregon. So this is the Oregon map. This shows the community transmissions on the CDC scale. So we've aligned to that. And we are at high community transmission of COVID-19 through the Delta variant in every single county except a couple here. And these two are in the substantial category. In Oregon, this is a map that shows the different variants of COVID-19. So you can see through the beginning of the pandemic, we were mostly in the first, the Alpha variant, but today more than 90% of our cases are the Delta variant. That's this red one on the end. This is the what we call the epi curve. So when they talk about waves of COVID-19 or surges, and they say, you know, we're in the fourth one or whatever number they name. For Oregon, you know, this is back in March to be on the far left side of this when we first discovered COVID-19 in the state. And then we saw that beginning surge or wave in July and then kind of leveled out. And then in the fall, we had another one, came down in March, and we had another one that came up in April and then went down. And now we're in a much more steep, much more significant outbreak that we're experiencing here at the end of July and into August. This is the hospitalizations, which is also kind of a new experience for Oregon to get to the level of hospitalizations that we're currently experiencing. So you can see the previous waves or phases are the current one that we're in is far higher than any we've experienced previously. Governor Brown has called out nearly 2,000 National Guard people to support the effort, has been seeking national resources and resources from other states to support our folks that have been hospitalized, not only due to COVID-19, but so that when there is an accident, when there's somebody who has a serious illness, a heart attack or a stroke, that they have a hospital to go to and care to receive from that hospital. But our hospitals across the state are operating at or beyond capacity. because of these mini hospitalizations related to the Delta variant and COVID-19. And almost all of these are among unvaccinated individuals that are in our hospital beds today. So again, very high hospitalization. This next one are folks that are in ICU beds. And this one down here is people who are on respirators in Oregon. So again, we're seeing all-time highs in all three of these categories. These slides are in your board book, so you can take a look at them. This shows the same information, but in a chart form rather than a graphic form. So I'm just including that for folks that prefer that model. We also are taking a look at the age impacts. So again, we're seeing an increase in case rates for all Oregonians, but this is particularly important to pay attention to. This dark red line down here is our 0 to 9-year-olds. So as we have more cases overall, we're having a similar percentage of people at different ages be impacted by COVID-19, but this means more children are being impacted also. So this is our 0 to 9-year-olds, and then the more bright red here is the 10 to 19-year-olds. So seeing quite a few children impacted by COVID-19. A couple more pediatric slides. So this breaks it down a little bit further for ages 0 to 5, 6 to 11, and 12 to 17. And again, each of these at all-time highs. So 12 to 17, you can compare, and even more so for our 6 to 11-year-olds, well above anything that our 6 to 11-year-old population has experienced previously. Looking at, again, pediatrics, so this is under 18, but by ethnicity and race. So our Hispanic population, this is cases per 100,000. You can see clearly that our Hispanic students or children, our Pacific Islander children, American Indian, Alaska Native children, Black African American children, all disproportionately impacted in comparison to multiracial Asian or white children in the state. And as I'm talking, Kati has joined us. So again, she might pop in and share additional information or make comments or help answer questions at any time. This is a little bit of projecting out. So the current modeling from a couple of different organizations that Oregon Health Authority goes to for modeling show that our rates will continue to increase into September. And then hopefully we'll see the top of this current wave of infections and we'll see it begin to drop down. Last fall, though, as you recall, we saw a pretty significant wave. Most epidemiologists around the country expect that this fall we will see another wave. So we could come off of this one in this very early fall, late summer, and then we could likely expect to see another one. We're hopeful it's not as high, but it is likely that this will come at us again. One of the things that Oregon has done well is that when we've seen a surge, the governor has taken action, by the stay home, stay safe orders, by mask mandates, by freezes in activities, going back to extreme levels. We've had different names for these kinds of things. This time we're doing both an indoor and an outdoor, beginning on Friday, mask requirements in the state. Each time we've done these in the past, they have curbed the increase and started us on our downward trend. And this model from OHSU shows that that's likely to happen again with the mask mandate if we reach 80% or better compliance with mask use. A lot of people have questions about vaccine breakthroughs. Again, I am sharing this information. I am not an epidemiologist, although I get to hang out with them quite a bit and learn a lot from them. We're happy to bring one of our epidemiologists in at a future meeting if you all would find that helpful. But we wanted to share a little bit here. to note that there are breakthrough cases, partly because there are more cases altogether, and each of the vaccines has, a level of effectiveness that has been named time and time again. But when all cases in an area go up, you also get more cases that are breakthrough. This shows the COVID-19 case rates by vaccination status. So you can see that really steep curve again for the unvaccinated, but some of our vaccinated population have also been impacted. That's the blue line down here at the bottom. They tend not to get as severe of cases, nor do they tend not to be impacted by death as an outcome as frequently. Vaccination, Dr. Scheidlinger always likes to end with this because this is good news right now. So you can see our vaccination curve. When vaccinations became available, we had these steady curve with more and more vaccinations available and quite a bit of participation in Oregon. And then it dropped off pretty significantly. But we are beginning to see an uptick again with vaccinations. And we're hoping now that the Pfizer vaccine and soon the others has full authorization that's not conditional in any way, that we'll see more people take advantage of the vaccination. This is the vaccination rates by county for those 18 and above. So this doesn't include that 12 to 18-year-old population. But you can see that we have some counties that are reaching for 80% vaccination status and some that are still around 40 to 50% vaccination status. And that's where some of our citizens are in the most danger right now. When you look at vaccination rates by age, you can see that, again, this 12 to 17-year-old group, we have, well, we're closing in on 54%. So that's grown since the last time I reviewed it. That's helpful to see. When you look at vaccination rate by race and ethnicity, you can see that our Pacific Islander group has the largest percentage of people with at least one dose, and then it drops down from there to these other groups of people. Okay, with that, I'm going to jump over quickly to some of the information that we are sharing with schools on thinking about how to operate this year. Back on June 25th, we introduced the Ready Schools Safe Learners Resiliency Framework for the next school year. So schools have had the summer to prepare for this. Again, this shifts most of the protocols to that local decision-making. But there are a lot of resources and support available within this document and a lot of recommendations. We focus on recommendations around equity, instructional practices, mental health and well-being, and then advisory health and safety metrics as well. There are some other documents that are sister documents to this that are also available around how to deal with a COVID-19 case in a school or an outbreak, how to work through the process, recovery process for students who experience disability, and a number of other documents that we can share if that's helpful to you. Because there is so much local decision-making, we have put some guidance in around that as well. So we've asked our school districts to attend to equity, especially for those communities that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 or by the state's response to COVID-19. We've given them access to the equity decision tool and asked them to invite in community and staff and partners to help work through what they will implement and how they will go about implementing that. We've asked them to be particularly thoughtful about layers of health and safety protections rather than relying on any single measure. We know the vaccine and the face coverings can be highly effective. That's why they are state requirements, but more is still needed. And there will be places where neither one of those other two face coverings or vaccines will be in play. So it's really important that they think about all the protections. We've asked them to invest time in their school staff and volunteers so that they're fully trained and have deep understanding to develop ways to teach the protocols to students with fidelity, so that they're learning, so that nothing is ever coming at students in a way that is punitive in nature, but is coming at them as a way that they learn all their routines at school. And then because these efforts might look a little different from school to school, to develop clear communication tools for community as well. Local collaboration is still very critical. This was in place last year. Even with local decision-making, there's this responsibility to connect locally and make sure all the partners are working together to support the effort. So critically, this means that to support in-person learning, there has to be a collaboration between the local public health authority and the school district at a minimum. There also needs to be a partnership between the school district and the tribe if they're working directly with students from any tribe. And there can be other partners as well. In general, the school health and safety decisions sit with the school district officials, but there are some, even in partnership, where they more fully belong to the local public health authority, including who actually determines quarantine for individuals. That's the health professionals, public health professionals at the local public health authority. School administrators, though, through administrative regulations, are required to exclude school staff and students who have been exposed to COVID-19. And then they immediately need to work with the local public health authority to determine when and how quickly they can come back into the learning setting. We've named that the advisory recommendations offer flexibility for districts, but also add a lot of responsibility onto our school districts. So that our advisory protocols are based on CDC guidelines with clarifications from our senior health advisors at the Oregon Health Authority. They were developed thinking about a mostly unvaccinated population that exists in our schools. The advisory protocols call out the importance of, again, that layered mitigation efforts, not thinking of one, but bringing in cohorting, bringing in physical distancing, airflow and ventilation, hand hygiene, cleaning and disinfecting. All of those remain important tools. And then that local decision-making will determine how and when those different mitigation protocols are implemented. As we've shared with you before, we are still working very hard at shifting some of the deficit-based narrative that we hear out there. We want to recognize all the learning that our students did accomplish over this last year. We recognize they may have some unfinished academic learning, but they have learned a lot of life lessons, and that needs to be honored and brought into the learning space. We want to think about accelerating the academic learning rather than going backwards and thinking about remediation. And our effort is on renewal and thinking about school differently and how we deliver school in an equitable, inclusive, and welcoming way for all of our students and their families and staff members. I'm going to touch a couple of the statewide requirements because they're so critical. We've sent out a lot of information about the statewide mask requirement. We have an FAQ for schools to help explain it to their communities. There's one-pagers of information sheets. There are information from our doctors at the Oregon Health Authority that walk through the studies showing the efficacy, effectiveness of face coverings, and also show that some of the studies that have gone around through social media and on the internet have been actually pulled back by the organizations that first published them because there were problems with some of those studies. We go over enforcement at the request of districts who wanted to be really clear with their communities that they're required to follow these face covering requirements and exactly what happens to a district when that doesn't happen. We have infographics. I'll show you one of those in just a minute. And we work with the partners at OSAA so that they can provide guidance around how face coverings work with school sports and school other school activities like music and band and those kinds of efforts. This statewide mask requirement is aligned with the current CDC guidance, which recommends universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors in K-12 schools, regardless of vaccination status. We also received a letter from the Oregon Pediatric Society and the Oregon Academy of Physicians, who desperately want our kids to be in school at this time and believe that the only way for that to happen is to keep our kids healthy, prevent quarantines, and in order to do that, we have to have a universal masking mandate in our schools. We also received a separate letter signed by 430 physicians here in the state of Oregon, urgently requesting statewide protective measures that include a requirement for universal masking in all K-12 schools. Because of those requests, because of the CDC's guidance, Oregon went to a statewide universal masking rule to deal with the impact of the Delta variant coming in so strong in the state. Oregon's not alone in this, so our West Coast partners in California and Washington also have statewide K-12 mask requirements, as do Arkansas, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Kentucky, Louisiana, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, Illinois, Rhode Island, Virginia, and Washington, DC, and some others that are still working towards this and will be naming their requirements over the next few days. In our rule, the Oregon Health Authority will look at the rule monthly for a shift back to local decision-making as soon as we believe that it's safe to do so. One of the side benefits in this, this infographic shows, and again, this gets back to our effort not only to keep our students safe, but to keep them in school as much as possible, is that under CDC guidelines now, when you're a student in school, the quarantine rules apply a little bit differently. So students who are under 6 feet from one another, but still at least 3 feet from one another, and where everyone is masked, if there is a person who has COVID-19, these folks on either side don't count as exposed, nor do the people farther away, when everyone wears a mask and they're at least 3 feet apart. If you're without a mask, you need to go into quarantine if you come into 6 feet of anyone for 15 minutes in cumulatively throughout the whole day. So this helps us keep more kids in school if we can wear face coverings in that space. Just yesterday, the governor announced a statewide outdoor mask requirement. And, you know, again, this is coming at us because the Delta variant is so transmissible. People who carry the Delta variant have 1,000 times more virus in their noses than those with the other variants. This is causing it to spread very readily from one person to another. And so the governor is putting forward a statewide mask mandate for outdoors that begins Friday this week, encouraging people to start sooner, of course. But regardless of vaccination status, when people are in outdoor settings, whoops, sorry about that. When people are in outdoor settings and they're around people from different households, they should also wear a face covering. This doesn't apply to those kind of like fleeting encounters where you're just walking by somebody very quickly on the sidewalk. But if you're in a gathering space, then this would apply. For schools, this is a little bit different. For schools, they have all these other mitigation efforts in place, and outdoors is one of the places where students can take a mask break. So we're trying to hold on to that. Outdoors, where there are things like cohorting and physical distancing and other mitigation efforts in place at recess, meals, classes that are held outside, students that are actively engaged in sports, in those areas, this outdoor masking rule does not apply. It does apply though, if there's a football game or a soccer game and there's a crowd there, or people on the sidelines, the coach and other players who aren't actively playing, all of those people would be masked. Childcare and youth programs don't fall under this rule. And we're still working with our schools to determine what kinds of questions need to be answered about the outside masking rule. We also have a new rule from the Oregon Health Authority at the governor's request for statewide vaccination for educators, people in the executive branch of government, and healthcare workers. So each of those groups. This is again, I'm going to skip by this one actually and go, I think, to the next slide. Oh, no. Okay, well, again, this is actually because we're trying to keep school happening in person for every student every school day. So when we are trying to do that, we need to keep everyone as safe and healthy as possible. And we need our teachers to be able to be in front of students in person in school. When individuals are vaccinated and they're exposed to someone with COVID-19, they are not required to quarantine unless they are symptomatic. There is some testing protocol that comes into play, which the schools have capacity to do, but this helps keep our staff and teachers at school serving students in a way that's safe for everyone. We know that this can be polarizing, especially in current times, but we also know here in Oregon, most of our educators went to public schools and are vaccinated against any number of other diseases. I have some listed on this slide. COVID-19 is a disease like others. It's transmissible. It doesn't care about personal values. It spreads from one person to another without targeting our prejudice. And the Delta variant does this really effectively and quickly. And for the unvaccinated is leading to some pretty significant harm. Because our hospitals are overcrowding, because we want to keep school going in person in a safe way, we're asking all of our educators and state employees and healthcare workers to vaccinate or share that they have an exception either due to a medical reason or disability or a religious reason to accept themselves from that requirement. With that, I'm 3 minutes over, but I can take questions if there are any, Kimberly, or if you need to release this, I can take them when we get back.
I think we should give some time if anyone has any questions. It's a lot of information.
Yes. And so much I
Yes,
left.
Gary, and then Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. Cole, in our local newspaper today, there was an article that said, if you are outdoor and speaking, you did not have to wear a mask. So it would be like, there is something I'm going to next week where it's the school board meeting outside and I'm speaking to them, and it's my understanding from our local newspaper, but then you didn't mention it, that if you're speaking outdoors, you can take your mask off. Is that accurate or not? Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Jerry. So that is accurate. The rule is actually not developed yet. So when we see the published rule, we'll know for sure exactly what the exceptions are. But it is the intent of the governor that the speaker, or in some cases the performer, could be a singer who's speaking to a large group, that they're far enough away from the audience and from the other members who might be in the ensemble, that it is safe and that they don't, and so that they can be heard, they don't have to wear a face covering. But the folks in the audience and other folks, when they aren't speaking, should be wearing a face covering to help keep everyone there safe.
Thank you.
Is it okay to speak, Chair Howard? Okay, sorry, I just didn't want to jump. Okay, thank you so much. And thank you, Colt, for the great presentation. I have a question about slide 37. And you talked about, the importance of vaccinations, that many of us have been vaccinated and all those things, especially in educational environments, all that. But at the bottom, it says, as with state employees and healthcare workers, religious and medical disability related exceptions apply. I just wanted to know what that looks like and what we can expect in our classroom as a result of that added piece there. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Let me see if I can, I have some other slides. Let me see if I can find one that speaks directly to those two rules. Let me share screen one more time. Thank you for the question again. So here's some specifics on those two requirements. So there are two exceptions. So a medical exception, which could cover some people who experience certain disabilities. So a medical exception needs to be corroborated by a document that's signed by a medical provider. The medical provider can't be the individual themselves. So if a person happens to be a healthcare worker, for example, they can't accept themselves. They need to go seek that from another healthcare provider. So that's listed here on this slide. The religious exception is a little bit different because people's religious views are their own deeply held convictions. So a religious exception must also be corroborated on a document that's created by the Oregon Health Authority, but it is the individual signing that they are requesting the exception from the vaccination on the basis of their sincerely held religious belief. That could include a statement that describes why the vaccination requirement conflicts with their religious observances, their practices, or the belief of that individual. When people take either one of those exceptions, the employer in schools or school-based programs is required to take reasonable steps to ensure that those unvaccinated staff members or volunteers are protected from both contracting themselves and from spreading COVID-19 to others to the best of their ability. So that could include things like a weekly testing. Our schools have access to surveillance testing that they can use. It could include using a more medical version of a mask, like a fitted N95 mask, or adding additional protections like a mask and a shield. Or in some positions, it could look like you're creating more physical distancing or having an isolated workspace where you're not around others. That's a little bit difficult for an actual classroom teacher, but those are some of the other options if a person takes those exceptions. Does that help?
That does help. There was some response, and I don't know what this is about, where there were some parents who did not want their kids to wear a mask and kind of a pushback against that. What can we expect as far as how our schools will respond? And the reason why I mention that is it's come up more now that there are teachers who had stepped down because they have an autoimmune disease or something going on where they're like, we know the risk is too high, and that happened during spring term. And so now there's more, it's more of a piece of conversation that's happening where it's like, ooh. So I was curious, like, is it clear that, will it be clear that masks will be required where it's like, there's no exceptions, we have to keep it safe? Or how will that work when there are parents who are, I've heard about some people saying it's my religious right not to wear a mask. And so I just wanted to know what that means, and what does ODE have to say about that kind of perspective? Thank you.
Yeah, really good question. And my answer is going to be a little bit long, but I'll try to be still clear and direct. So first of all, we believe that the first answer to all of that is education. So we want to ensure that the student or the family understands why wearing a mask is so critical, and that we all have, a desire to honor personal freedoms in our country. But at this time, personal freedoms also come with responsibilities for our community. The way that we're going to get through COVID-19 in Oregon and in the United States and around the world is through community action, not through individual action. So we all have to take a part, not only to protect ourselves, and that's a personal choice, whether you want to protect yourself, but also to protect your neighbors. And that can be the student sitting next to you, the teacher teaching the class, or your neighbor across the street. That we all have that, we all carry that responsibility to support one another through this. And ensure that we're not doing anything that would allow the disease to transmit from one person to another. So in a school setting for individual students, if a student has an identified disability that actually does impede or cause some harm for them to wear a face covering, then there's a process that that is designed for a school district to walk through with the special education teachers and the other people who would form a typical IEP team, an individual education plan team, that would have that disability identified and how it impairs their ability to wear a face covering. And then there are a number of adaptations, accommodations, and modifications that can be allowable. It's a process for educators. This is getting way into the detail. That's kind of like a manifestation determination. So it's a process to go through for a student who has an actual disability that would impair their ability to wear a mask. For somebody whose family or an individual student who's making kind of a values-based decision not to wear a mask, again, we don't want to be punitive about this. So this isn't about any kind of threats. It's about teaching and understanding. And then if they still ultimately are making the decision not to wear a mask, that means that that school district has a responsibility to find a place outside an in-person school setting to serve that student. So that student, as soon as they are willing or their family is willing to wear a mask, can come back to the in-person setting, but otherwise they need to be served in some kind of a remote education model.
That is great. Thank you so much for clarifying all of that. Thank you.
Do we have other questions, comments for Director Gill, or Director Gill, do you have anything else to add based on the questions we've already had?
No, I don't think so. Thank you. And I'm sorry that there is so much more to share, but hopefully you can check it out online and feel free to reach out anytime if you have questions.
Thank you so much. It's very, 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 very informative. So we're going to go ahead and break for lunch. We love the idea of an hour lunch, but to stay sort of on track, and also because we have Ms. Blumenstein and Ms. Pearson on coming to give us a report at 1. Let's come back at 1 o'clock. I will task myself to come back sooner than 1 o'clock in case there are any other coworker interruptions in our household. But let's start back at 1 o'clock. And so let's do a 42-minute break, 43-minute break. Not quite 45. Let's just put it that way. Almost 45-minute break. Thank you, everyone. And then videos are off, and we are adjourned for break for lunch. Welcome back, everyone. After our break, we are here for the Oregon State Board of Education annual retreat. We're about to have a staff report on expanding access to well-rounded education from Beth Blumenstein, Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment, and Alexa Pearson, also of the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment. Thank you so much both for being here. And there's somebody else that I see, but I don't have your name.
Hi, Director Howard. This is Jennifer Patterson, and I am Assistant Superintendent of OTLA, just here for support.
Oh, great. Nice to see you, Jennifer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the gracious welcome.
So we'll go ahead and turn it over to you all. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. Director Chair Howard, Director Gill, and members of the State Board of Education. We are really happy to be here. My name is Alexa Pearson. I'm the Director of the Standards and Instructional Support Team, and that's in the Office of the Teaching, Learning, and Assessment. And I'm here today. We were here in December of 2020. I was here with Tom Thompson, and we shared about a federal grant we had received in October of 2020, which was a well-rounded grant that we applied for strategically because we really wanted to look at ways we could increase the access to well-rounded education, especially around arts education in Oregon. The first part of that grant was hiring, and it's a planning year. We're coming to the end of that planning year. And one of the first things we did was hire Beth Blumenstein. And so I'm very happy to have her here today. She is the Well-Rounded Access Program. We do have an acronym because it would not be part of education if we did not have an acronym there. So it is WRAP. WRAP, and she'll talk more about that. And Beth is amazing. She has been with the department for 15 years. She has worked a lot in data, but the beautiful thing about Beth is this other side of her brain. She has always been very passionate about the arts, and she even said she'd play the French horn potentially today, so watch out. But she's here today to really explain what we've done this year and what we have planned for the years ahead. This is a 5-year grant. She'll explain that. So we have plenty of time for questions at the end and discussion. And again, we're just very happy to be here. And Beth, you can take it away.
All right. Thank you, Alexa. And hello. Thank you for having me, Chair Howard and members of the State Board of Education. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here to give you just a presentation about what we're talking about. Okay, so as Alexa said, we're talking about the well-rounded access program today. And before we begin, I wanted to talk about the definition of well-rounded, because it is a word that's thrown here and there quite a bit, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So the definition we're using, while the federal Every Student Succeeds Act defines a well-rounded education to include a variety of subjects and areas of study, Oregon believes a well-rounded education moves beyond the courses students take and into the essential knowledge and skills students are learning in those courses. We know that a well-rounded education provides the knowledge and skills to live, learn, work, create, and contribute. It also ensures that each and every student is known, heard, and supported. The goal of this work is to establish and actualize a definition of well-rounded education that focuses on the whole student and their community, the learning experiences they are given, the knowledge and skills they learn, and the beliefs and attributes they develop. So as we talk about this program, you may not hear specifics to courses and course topics. We will be getting into that in the future of our work, but today we're grounding in the definition of well-rounded that goes beyond those specific course topics. Also with well-rounded, there's a lot of work being done, not only in ODE, but around the state. So there's some different topics I've listed here. There's more than this, but for example, we could talk about funding, law, rule, and policy, coordination, etc. But with this grant in particular, it is focused on access, specifically course access structures and the courses themselves. So as we move forward in this conversation, that's going to be my focus, the access structures and the courses, because that's what this grant supports. ODE's education equity stance states that education equity is the equitable implementation of policy, practices, procedures, and legislation that translates into resource allocation, education rigor, and opportunities for historically and currently marginalized youth, students, and families, including civil rights protected classes. This means the restructuring and dismantling of systems and institutions that create the dichotomy of beneficiaries and oppressed and marginalized. So as we look at that definition and the work that we're doing through this program, we realize that well-rounded work is equity work. And so as we're going through all of the topics with this work, as we're asking questions about how to move forward with it, we're really looking at some of these key questions. For example, when we're working with our engagement partners, we're looking at who is at the table, and quite frankly, what table are we at? As we're looking at our needs assessment, we're looking at which students do not have access to which courses, because we know that this program is more than just developing courses and handing it to schools. There's much more that goes into creating equitable access for students. As we're looking at through our evaluation process, we're looking at why students don't have access, or as we're implementing courses, why students maybe are or are not selecting to participate in them. When we're looking at our course development, we're asking questions about how does each student see themselves in the content that's being given. And as we're looking at access structures, we're looking at, are all students receiving high quality options? And one of the intention of this grant is really to lead to equitable outcomes for all students. So for example, one of our long-term outcomes we identified is that student participation and benefit from well-rounded education is not predicted by things like their geography, income, race, ethnicity, gender, English language ability, or participation in an IEP. When we're looking at the grant highlights, and Alexa did talk about this a little bit, it's a 5-year program. We are in the first year, which is a planning year for this program. It's $9.8 million, and our focus of the work is on STEM, STEAM, and the arts. So when we're looking at that specific course content, we are looking at the broader structure of STEM and STEAM and the arts. We're also looking at assessing school and community needs. So a big portion of the work we're doing during this planning year is developing with others what this looks like based on what the need is out there. One of our big projects that our research analyst is working on right now is a needs assessment to help determine that. And then we're also obviously looking at equitable access, because well-rounded access isn't access unless it's equitable. For some of the grant intent and requirements, so the program should increase course access to well-rounded courses. That was the main point of the grant. It should complement rather than duplicate existing efforts, and any student in the state should have the opportunity to request access to courses. So this means students who may not have it available at their school could have the option to maybe get it online, or students who aren't part of the public school system maybe also might have access to it. It does have an equitable share portion to this grant. We are a part of 5 other states who received the same grant, and every state gets to do something a little bit different, which is a lot of fun, and also it's just creative, talking to other states about what they're doing with their grant. So I just wanted to share with you what those other states are doing. In Indiana, they're increasing access for dual credit AP and CTE courses. Massachusetts is increasing access for STEM AP courses. Nevada is increasing access for CTE, AP, and work-based learning. New Mexico is creating an online CTE program for students, and Oklahoma is expanding access to their fine arts programs. So some of the project elements, and Tom did mention this back in December, which was quite a long time ago, so I'll refresh your memory. We have 4 different strategies to increasing access. One is partnering with STEM and STEAM hubs, higher education, and CTE to really figure out what exists there and expand upon it. Or if there are creative ideas that, for example, our STEM hubs are doing, but maybe they haven't solidified what that really looks like, this program can then elevate some of those projects. A second strategy is to hire an arts education specialist and some others. So we didn't have an arts education specialist at the department at the time that we applied for this grant, and we knew this was a good way to use some of those funds, is to hire an arts education specialist to really leverage some of that work. A third strategy is to utilize Oregon Open Learning and Oregon Digital Learning. Oregon Open Learning is our openly licensed resource platform for educators. We stood that up during the beginning stages of the pandemic for educators to access online content that's openly licensed and editable. And then we also have Oregon Digital Learning. Some of you may have remembered this under the name of Oregon Virtual School District, but essentially what it is a program for any student in the state to be able to access courses that might not be available at their school through an online mechanism. So if they don't have someone who teaches Spanish at their high school, they might be able to get it through this program, for example. And then the last strategy is to engage in a competitive procurement process to really identify what don't we have through these other strategies and what we need to contract out for. Through all of that, it's pretty broad. Our grant narrative was pretty vague, so that it allowed us to engage with community and education partners and really develop what this program is going to look like from here on out. So we've been doing a lot of engagement with different folks around the state, determining what already exists, where are there gaps, where do we need to fill in, and what can we leverage in order to move this project forward. With that being said, since we are still in our planning year, we are still doing engagement. I do not have specific courses to tell you today that we're going to expand. We're still in that process. And through that, we're going to be building a 4-year plan so that we can have something more concrete in the future about how we're moving forward this work. Also with this, we have an evaluation process. So we're in the process of hiring an evaluator to help us evaluate the program, where it's going, and maybe fill in some of those pieces about why students are getting access that we can address in this way. To give you a big picture timeline or planning year ends September 30th, according to the grant. And by then, we're hoping to have all of our positions filled, a needs assessment finalized, initial engagement sessions complete. And that doesn't mean we're stopping engagement at that point, but just that we've had a chance to talk to those we've identified as engagement partners and tell them what the program is and start developing what this looks like, and then have a 4-year plan developed about how we're going to move forward in the next 4 years of implementation. So then in years 2 through 5, we're going to implement new courses and course access structures, do continued outreach, ongoing evaluation, and data collection. So what have we accomplished since we last talked to you in December? I was hired in February. We had a research analyst hired in May, and this is very exciting. We hired an arts education specialist, and she starts on Monday. So we're really excited to have her join us. As far as our evaluator, we've identified a potential evaluator, but we haven't formalized anything yet. So hopefully in the next coming weeks or so, we'll have an evaluator join us as well. As far as engagement, we've developed an engagement plan. I have a link to that in your resources. If you want to read it in the future, it is quite a long document, but it does show all of the partners that we want to engage with during this work and how we intend to engage with them as far as sort of what level of engagement we're anticipating. I've met formally with the STEM Investment Council and STEM hubs. I've met informally with many different organizations around the state, doing a lot of one-on-one presentations about what this is and what it could be. We've sent out many different emails to partners and scheduled some more formal engagement for this next coming month in September. As far as our vision, mission, and 4-year plan, we've drafted a logic model that we're starting to share with our engagement partners and really build upon what they see as the outcomes for this work. And we've drafted a needs assessment as well. Again, that will hopefully be finalized by the end of September. So what are we doing next? We have one last hire for this position, a part-time administrative specialist. We are going to contract with an evaluator and finalize an evaluation plan. And one of the things that's coming up that we haven't really delved into yet, I'm really excited to start the work on, is the actual courses that we're going to be increasing, putting out an RFP for courses, putting out IGAs for courses in certain circumstances, and identifying best strategies to bring courses to our Oregon Digital Learning Program. As far as engagement goes, we're going to continue engagement through this whole process, the whole 5 years. And we're going to incorporate the engagement we've been receiving recently into our needs assessment and our 4-year plan, as well as sharing those back out to our engagement partners for a final assessment before we move forward with our work. And then with our vision, mission, and 4-year plan, we're going to continue to update our logic model based on the engagement. We're going to continue collecting data and build upon the needs assessment, and again, finalize our 4-year plan. So what do we need from the State Board of Education? First of all, we wanted you to be informed. This is a really exciting program that we're just thrilled to stand up and work on across the state, and wanted you to be aware of what's going on. Second, we want you to connect people to this work. So again, we've listed those folks that we're engaging with in our engagement plan, but if there are others there that aren't listed that should be, please let us know. We're still building that list. We will continue to build that list throughout the 5 years of this grant. So if there are others, please let me know, and we'd be happy to involve them in this work. And then also to help connect the dots between initiatives, because Well-Rounded is so broad and there's a lot happening in the state. We understand that we're going to miss some things. So if you know of other initiatives that are happening that we need to connect with, again, please let us know. And then last, just to provide feedback on our approach, what we've done so far, and what you want to see out of the possibilities of this program. So last, I have some contact information here. If you want to join our monthly newsletter, you're more than welcome to do so, or contact me if you have any questions. But at this point, I'll go ahead and stop sharing and see if you have any questions, comments, or would like to discuss what this could look like.
Thank you so much, Beth. Oh, yes, Jennifer.
Thank you, Chair Howard, and thank you, Beth, for your presentation. I have a question. When you mentioned in one of your slides about what do we need from the State Board of Education, be informed, connect people to this work, are you asking for us to make suggestions about specific teachers or educators that you think would that we think would be awesome to help work alongside of you, or is it more of specific, like outside agencies, organizations? I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Howard and Director Skurlock. We're looking for really anybody. So right now we've done a lot of outreach to specific organizations, but if there are teachers who would love to be involved in this work, we'd be happy to know who they are and provide information. We have surveys we can send for some basic information, and we also have with our work down the line, we'll be doing a lot of engagement around rubrics that we have for curriculum and that kind of thing, where we will need teacher voice.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any other questions or comments? Advisement, as Beth said. I wanted to note a couple of contacts that you probably have already connected with, and that's Jerry Tischleiter at Oregon Community Foundation, and then the Miller Foundation, Martha Richards leads. And then Deborah Vaughn, who I think is no longer with the Arts Commission, but started with those three, really working to help this grant come to into the purview of the ODE, like brought it to your attention basically, and then supported the grant writing. So those are all members of the arts community and leadership in the funding community that can be very helpful. Mostly, and then OCF, as you probably already know, they convened over a period of time, starting right at the beginning of COVID, I feel like, a group of arts leaders from around the state. And access was one of the big conversations. Policy and leadership was also part of that conversation, and advocacy. So they have some great resources and information that came report style after that extensive listening, if that is also helpful information. And again, that's maybe for the arts specialist to sort of pick up, since that's mostly the arts leaders. But since the well-rounded education work and this grant was really led by the arts community because of creative expression, I just wanted to make sure that that we're not duplicating efforts, that information is incorporated into the work. And it's no joke. It's no secret. I'm an artist by training, and I'm also a STEM advocate by my work. And so the two of those things together, not called STEAM, but we can have that conversation offline. But STEM plus the arts is powerful. And I do want to note that when we talk about STEM education and career technical education, we're talking about sort of engineering and designing solutions to our human conundrums. When we talk about the arts and creative expression, we're talking about understanding the human conundrum in order to better find solutions. So those two things are interwoven. We recognize that not every child is an artist, but every person does have need for creative expression. We know that not every child is a future STEM professional. Case in point, right? We had the math conundrum earlier today. That's my favorite word today. But having access to the learning really creates the mindset, both the growth mindset, but also the cognitive problem-solving skills and the ability to think outside of the box in terms of solutioning. And you have all heard me speak on multiple occasions about the 5-year-olds who live in my home and who have been sort of mascots of the state board since they were 10 months old. They're the most creative people that I know, and I want them to continue to be creative. And I want that for every Oregon student, because it is invaluable, and it is ultimately one of the reasons why children are more resilient than adults, is because their creativity is still innately part of them and it hasn't been sort of socialized out. So this work is super profoundly important to our future as a community. And it is relevant, very, very relevant at this moment in time when we talk about going back into school full time for people, 5-year-olds and older who've not been socialized for the last 18 months. And it's creative expression that enables us to have empathy, to talk across bridges, to be curious about each other, and then to find our own voices and to stand in our voice in front of others. So you've all heard me say that before, but I wanted to say it again. And I really appreciate this work, Beth, that you've taken on. Thank you so much. We're excited to meet other members of the team and get future updates as the work goes on. But I want to stop talking because I want to make sure there's not anyone else that has anything that they would like to add to this conversation or any questions that you have for Beth or for Alexa. Yes, Jennifer.
Thank you. I do have a question. Do we have student stakeholders or students that are involved in the conversations around what they want or what they envision? I just wanted to hear if there was, that's such an important part of the work that we do. And every time I ask students about what they think, they always give me so much more than what I thought as I'm planning curriculum and what have you. So I was wondering, as far as the grant and all the things that are going on, do you have student stakeholders that are a part of the conversation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Howard and Director Skrlak. That is an excellent question. To date, we haven't had student voice on our engagement. It doesn't mean it's not going to be a part, though. That is part of our plan, and it is a direct measure that we're using as we're evaluating our program as well. So it's actually one required by the U.S. Department of Education to submit.
And Chair Howard, if I may just extend my gratitude, because it is true, the arts community brought this grant to us, and your support, Chair Howard, has been tremendous. And just to really highlight, it's one of those things, when I first came to the department, Jennifer Patterson knows that's the first thing I asked was like, okay, I have this team, but where's the arts? And when people call for questions about the arts and things like that, same with world language, these were questions that I had, and we wouldn't have been able to pursue this. And again, it was kind of one of those times where it came to us, and the support of the arts community was huge in the whole process. So just really want to, just as we end, extend gratitude for that. And I'm really excited that we actually have wheels and we're getting moving on this.
That's wonderful to hear. And thank you so much for sharing that gratitude and back, for doing the work. Thank you all for doing the work. We might be coming to the end, or it could just be that you all had food and now you're feeling mellow. But this is the last thing on our agenda item for today. So is there anything else that anyone has on behalf of our WRAP program, Well-Rounded Access Program, staff members, anything else you would like to say, add, or ask of them before we let them go? Yes, Jennifer.
I know, I was like so excited. I admit it, I'm excited. So I love all of this. What is the program doing to make sure that students of color and their voice is included in the conversation? And I guess, again, those blind spots, and for me as an educator, where I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. Thank you so much, to make sure that they are part of the conversation. And I know that the grant, from my understanding, is trying to reach multiple groups, making sure there's representation. But we know in our current political environment that there's some unfortunate pushback against the importance of that. And so I just was curious about maybe what are some of the ideas coming up around, again, making sure that we are uplifting our students of color here in our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Howard and Director Skurlock. That is an excellent point and an excellent question. At this point, we have really been focusing on who our engagement partners are and reaching out to the community. So like I said, students haven't been involved in that conversation. But as far as the adults at the table, we have been having lots of conversations with groups that represent students, as you mentioned. And I just wanted to point out that one of the engagement sessions that we had, a comment was made about how in the STEM fields that are offered or in the STEM courses that are offered, currently BIPOC students don't feel safe in those courses. And how can we use this program to ensure safety and that students feel welcome? STEM is, and the arts, they're courses for all students, not just a particular set of students. And I think that's a mindset that we need to change and address, and this work will be involved in that.
Thank you for saying that. I guess my encouragement would be to really make that clear to our districts, administrators, and educators, because unfortunately, the way that our systems are set up, they do create our systems, educational systems, where certain kids are encouraged or pushed into certain groups as high achievers or what have you based on test scores, as if a test score confirms what a kid can and cannot do. And so if we can maybe figure out a way to strategize around that to make it clear that all students, especially our students of color, need to be recruited and encouraged to be a part of this, not based on a test score or an A+ grade or something like that, that would deter them or minimize how many students of color or low socioeconomic status students can be a part of it. The language is going to have to be intentional, because I don't think it's necessarily meant to cause harm, but some of the silos that have been in place do cause harm when it comes to who has access to these programs. So just putting that out there about being very strategic on how it's worded so that students, certain groups of students, are not left out of the conversation or left out of these programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Skurlock. To add to that, I would just say that this is also an incredible opportunity, and you've already talked with the STEM hubs, which is great, that there are across the state, the STEM hubs, which are really working with the community-based organizations. Many of them are culturally specific STEM organizations and career technical education organizations, but they've also, done a lot of equity work. As well as the arts organizations. I think of parts of the state where you would think, oh, well, they don't have a symphony, right? But they do, and there are artists in that community that are providing opportunities for students to learn the strings. But if the school doesn't know about it, then it doesn't help the students that maybe are interested in that know about those things. So this is another really great opportunity to connect with community-based organizations and support the partnerships that really can strengthen the work. When I was at the Oregon Cultural Trust, we talked a lot about not everyone thinks of themselves as, and I will say both as a STEM person or as an artist for that matter, but everyone can think of a time when they caught themselves singing in the shower, right? Or, there's somebody that your grandfather or your grandmother for that matter, maybe taught you to whittle a stick into a little figurine. There's some schools where everyone takes wood shop and it's not considered a separate thing, like, oh, over there, that career technical education thing is over there. And I remember thinking about the number of times you have to add and subtract in your day. And that's just basic math, right? But then we have to plant a garden. Or if you're in agriculture, you're planting a whole field. And that is so much math and vectors and a little bit of geometry, a lot of geometry about how you are cultivating that crop. And then now there's all these new technologies, right, where drones can help you plant seeds, or drones can help you, do sort of weed assessment in your very large crops. And so there's now you've got technology involved and all of that. But on top of that, I just wanted to also say that there's always been a conversation about arts versus craft, folk arts, what is art? And to just reiterate what Jennifer was saying, really keeping in mind and help top of mind that some of the references and the examples that we use in STEM, career technical education, and arts education can be exclusive. And so really thinking about how we define creative expression, how we define science, technology, engineering, math, so that, and how we connect to local communities to show the relevance of those things and how it's actually happening in their community, so that they're not thinking, oh, art only happens in Portland when you go to the opera, or math only happens at Intel when you are doing coding. No, it happens, like I said, right in your community too. So I think that this is just a wonderful opportunity for some real place-based partnerships to strengthen the work and to really to increase that access, both the access that we think about, oh, is that accessible to me, as well as actually, here's an instrument, or here's a paintbrush, or here's a microscope. Here are the tools for these things. So I think we're preaching to the choir though, Jennifer. And so we have the team that's going to make this happen. And it sounds like the rest of the board and advisors are clear on what your charge is, and there aren't any other questions. All right. Thank you, everyone. This is going to be more than a magic meeting that we are going to adjourn a little bit early today. What a wonderful way to begin to close out our summer. Some of you have already started school. I know in other parts of the country in particular, in the last couple of weeks, I know the boys start school on Monday. Their first day of their
school. Hey, Mom, look at that.
Okay, can I look at that as soon as I'm finished with my speech? I'm not gonna look at it right now. Thank you. So kindergartners, we told them the other day they start kindergarten and then they're gonna be in school for the rest of their life or working. So I was inspired, Jerry, by how school has been an inspiration to you, that you just kept going to school. It is a thing. It's exciting, and they are excited. And so for all of you parents and families and community members who are getting ready to send your students back to school, whether it's your neighbor or your grandkid or your kids, starting school for the first time, here we go. The school year is about to begin. Congratulations on making it through the summer. And happy dog days of summer for these last few days. We really, really center your students in this work. And we thank I thank this board and this group of advisors and the wonderful staff at ODE for centering our students, so that every student feels that every student belongs, and every student can learn. I'm going to end with this last little tidbit of remembrance. So 10 months old, they came to the first board meeting with me, the retreat at Silver Falls. And I said, well, I joined this board so that when they start kindergarten in 5 years, our public school system will be ready for them. Because, like I said, they're creative. They've got a lot of energy. They're 2 boys. They're biracial African-American boys. And they are very clear on who they are and what they want. And they are verbal about it. And they ask questions and they are curious. And so school system, Corbett, arts program with Spanish, you better be ready. Here come Madison and Kenton. And here come all the other kids ready to be back in the classrooms, ready to learn. So here we go. Thank you everyone for your time today. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock on the same Zoom channel.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.